Have you ever wondered which TV actually makes you play better with faster inputs, cleaner motion, and which one just looks bright on a spec sheet? Hey, I'm Evan from Ratings.com. Today we're ranking the best gaming TVs of 2025, the sets that change how your games look and feel. We tested input lag, pixel response times, VRR, 4K up to 120, 144, and 165 Hz, game mode brightness, HDR tone mapping, reflection handling, and how many HDMI 2.1 ports you really get. Then we matched each pick to real rooms and budgets. So, what should you buy? The matte QD OLED that tames glare, the value OLED that nails motion, or the bright mini LED that bulldozes daylight? If you want the best of the best with almost no compromises, this is the one. The Samsung S95F is a QD OLED with near instant pixel response times, so fast motion looks razor clean, and input lag is exceptionally low for a snappy, connected feel. It's also the only OLED with a matte screen in 2025, which makes a huge difference in bright rooms, as overhead lights and even direct light sources become far less distracting than on glossy OLEDs. That's rare, and it makes the S95F viable in spaces where we usually steer people towards mini LEDs. It also ships with Samsung's One Connect box, so every port lives in a separate hub and a single thin cable runs to the panel. That makes wall mounting cleaner, and you get 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs on the box for a PS5, an Xbox, and a gaming PC. Highlights and HDR really pop on this set, and color volume is outstanding for games that lean into colorful effects and bright UI. The short version: it's the fastest feeling, most flexible gaming TV that we've tested, and it's bright enough, especially because of that matte finish, to use in the real world, not just a blacked out cave. Sorry, Batman. A note for Xbox players: like all Samsungs, there is no Dolby Vision gaming here. In practice, that isn't a deal breaker since most Xbox titles aren't mastered in Dolby Vision, and the S95F's raw HDR performance is excellent. If you want best-in-class motion feel, high refresh, and real-world reflection handling in one TV, this is your top pick. If you don't need 165 Hz or the matte coating and you want to save some real money, grab the Samsung S90F. You still get OLED speed, VRR, 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, and 4K up to 144 Hz, but unlike the S95F, the S90F doesn't ship with the One Connect box, so your cable is plugged straight into the TV. Motion clarity is essentially identical to the S95F, and input lag remains very low, so the controller feel is excellent. Overall, if you don't need the matte coating, the One Connect box, or 165 Hz, this is the value play. Still, there are trade-offs. SDR brightness is lower than on the S95F, and the screen is glossy, so reflections are more visible in bright rooms. In a moderately lit space, that's a non-issue. In a very bright living room, you'll definitely notice it. Also, panel type varies by size and region. Most sizes are QD OLED, but check the model number before you buy it, if you can. If you game mostly at night or can control room light, this is the same feel, fewer frills version of our top pick. Want an OLED at a friendlier price that still feels premium for gaming? The LG B5 is our mid-range choice. It's a WOLED, so colors aren't as saturated as Samsung's QD OLEDs, and you top out 4K at 120 instead of 144 or 165 Hz. But you keep 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, VRR, extremely low lag, and near instantaneous response time, which means that you still get that unmistakable OLED motion clarity. One perk if you play with the lights on: WOLED blacks don't take on the purple tint that QD OLEDs can show in bright rooms, so dark scenes look more neutral. And if you're in the Xbox ecosystem, Dolby Vision gaming is supported here. It's dimmer than the Samsungs in HDR, but it's still bright enough for highlights to stand out. And SDR brightness is fine for rooms with a few lights on. If you want a true gaming OLED without chasing absolute peak specs, or peak price, the B5 hits the sweet spot. If you don't want OLED or just prefer the brightness of a mini LED TV, the TCL QM7K is the non-OLED gaming set that makes the most sense. This TV is very bright and handles ambient reflections very well, so it stays vivid in daylight and under overhead lights, especially when playing SDR games. Just make sure to avoid placing lights directly opposite the TV, as it doesn't perform as well with direct reflections. Local dimming is strong for the class. Blacks look convincingly deep with only minor haloing, so HDR games look dimensional. On the gaming side, you get 4K up to 144 Hz, 1080p up to 288 Hz, and VRR. Pixel transitions aren't OLED instant, but they're quick for an LED, so fast motion shows only light blur trails. If you're used to gaming on LED TVs, you're likely to find this TV's pixel response time very quick, as TCL's 2025 models are faster than any other brands. Input lag is low, especially at higher refresh rates, so shooters and racing games feel responsive. If your living room pulls double duty between esports and streaming, this is the mini LED that we buy at this price. If the QM7K stretches your budget, the TCL QM6K keeps that gaming DNA intact. You still get VRR, 4K up to 144 Hz, and 1080p up to 288 Hz on the 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. You also get low input lag and transitions that are surprisingly quick for the price. The trade-offs land in picture quality. Blacks aren't as deep as the QM7K, color is more muted, and the HDR is too dim to make highlights really pop. SDR is bright enough for typical rooms though, and reflection handling is decent. In dark HDR titles with lots of specular effects, you'll notice the limits. Otherwise, the day-to-day gaming feel remains close to the pricier TCL. That's exactly why it's our budget pick, as it plays right, even if it doesn't wow you on HDR titles. Keep in mind that how impressed you are depends a lot on what you're coming from. If you're upgrading from a basic TV set, this TV will impress you, even in HDR. But when compared to our higher-end picks, that's where its HDR performance leaves something to be desired. Last but not least, if you just want the biggest 4K screen for the least money and you still plan on playing some games, the Hisense QD6QF is the gets it done option. There's no local dimming, so blacks look gray and HDR is flat, and it's a 60Hz TV at 4K. It does support VRR, and there is a 1440p at 120Hz mode if you prefer frames over pixels, but be aware, input lag spikes at 1440p at 120. So most people should stick to 4K at 60Hz here. We actually think that it's a bug that it supports 1440p at 120Hz, but not 1080p at 120Hz, which would explain the high input lag. Either way, we recommend that you stick to 4K at 60Hz. Motion handling is only okay, but acceptable for the price. And Dolby Vision gaming works for Xbox titles that can use it. If your budget can't reach the Cube 6K, this is the cheap way to game on a big panel without hating the experience. Alright, let's recap. If you want the most complete gaming TV, get the Samsung S95F. QD OLED speed, 165Hz, 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, and a matte screen so reflections don't ruin daytime gaming. If you want almost all that for less and you're fine with a glossy screen and 144Hz, the S90F is the move. It's a bit dimmer than the S95F, but it's otherwise basically the same TV, just glossy and without a One Connect box. For a more affordable OLED that keeps 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, VRR, adds Dolby Vision, and avoids the purple-black look in bright rooms, pick the LG B5. Its colors are a bit more muted, and it's definitely dimmer than the Samsung, but otherwise it's a fast and responsive OLED. If you prefer non-OLED, the TCL Cube 7K brings the right mix of speed, brightness, and dimming to the table. The TCL Cube 6K keeps the feel on a budget, and the Hisense QD6QF is the truly cheap entry point, with usable VRR, but skip the 1440p at 120Hz mode. If you're still not sure, match the pick to your room and gear. Count your HDMI 2.1 sources, decide whether you want 144, 165Hz, or just 120Hz, and be honest about your lighting, along with your budget. Get that right, and any TV on this list will make your games look and feel fantastic. If you want to know more about our picks, check out our site for the full test results, photos, and performance data. Thanks for watching, and tell us which TV you prefer. We want to know. Until next time, I'm Evan from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs.